Hello, Jacques. Good to see you. Welcome.
Hello, David. I'm just texting my followers on X that we're going live.
Excellent. Yes, we. This is kind of unannounced and serendipitous. So hopefully people will be notified by their favorite platforms. We are on X, Facebook, YouTube, maybe Rumble. I tried to reconnect, and we'll see if that integration works today. And it's Thursday, the 15th of January. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you and to all our listeners.
Yes. Big year coming up. I've got big expectations for 2026. And starting with, we're going to go through some news. So for those of you tuning in, this is the Libertarian Currents show, where Jacques and I, and sometimes others, we react to current events. And so there's some news we're going to deal with and talk about today, and react to some of the things going on in the zeitgeist. The first of which is a post from Keith Wilson. And let's just have a look at this post. I know, Jacques, you were looking forward to tomorrow for this reason. Could you share with us the news?
Yes, well, just to remind people, there was a judgment, and I forget which court level it was, but the judge ruled that the Emergencies Act, or enacting the act, or
Invoking
the act, thank you, had broken the law because it did not meet the thresholds required. And of course, the government decided to appeal. And the Federal Court of Appeal is now going to, the expectation is, release its decision tomorrow. So this is a very, very big deal, because if it confirms the first ruling, then I think many of the people in the Liberal government are, well, I don't know if they're in trouble per se, because they probably have some kind of legal protection, but it would put them very much on the back foot, as it were, and it would confirm what many, many people have said, including, the two of us, that the justification for invoking the act was totally inappropriate. It was overkill, should never have been done, terrible from the word go. Now, the sad part is that if the court rules the other way, then, like I think in terms of these two outcomes, not only would it be bad, but it would be worse than the positive aspect, because this would now grant a party in power that, let's face it, has many, many people who are naturally very authoritarian. And this would amount to almost giving carte blanche, because frankly, if it rules that the invoking the act was appropriate, makes you wonder when the court would say that it was not. I've done some writing on this in the past, and I pointed out that the ex-premier of Newfoundland,
Brian Peckford.
Yes, right. He has said that the Emergencies Act was not created for the purpose that the Liberals have used it for. He said, it was for invasion of the country, things of that nature, right? Not a pandemic that was leaving most people unscathed. So this is a very, very big deal. If the court goes the other way, I think we're in for future use of it in a way that would be frivolous almost.
Yeah. And let's remind people of the historical timeline here. Freedom Convoy showed up in Ottawa. Trucks are parked on Wellington Street, but by direction of the police. The police said, "Yep, park here. You're not going to do a slow roll. We're not going to let you go around town. You're going to be confined to this Wellington Street. These few city blocks." And so, following those instructions, they did. And of course, time passed. Invoke the Emergencies Act, froze bank accounts, took money or froze money from legal fundraising, the GoFundMe account. There were all kinds of other things going on. And then the invoking the Emergencies Act allows a sort of grace period where the Prime Minister and the Cabinet can invoke the act before the Senate 10 days later is to rule on it. Well, right before the Senate was supposed to vote on whether this was done properly, it was rescinded. And so it was never put to that test. And then it was discussed in that kangaroo court with some sort of appointed judge, but it wasn't a courtroom where there was a bunch of grandstanding and I forget, he was a former justice, David, I forget his name, who somehow, what did he declare that, it could have done things better or differently, but, the government really had no other choice, was his ruling. And then this went to actual court. As you said, it was the federal court who decided this was illegally invoked. I don't know what that means, though, Jacques. So if it's illegal to have invoked the Emergencies Act, doesn't that mean that a crime was committed? And if a crime has been committed, are there no charges laid? Like, I know I'm asking rhetorically, but doesn't that strike you as odd?
Well, so they broke the law, right? They did something that was assuming that the ruling is confirmed. They broke the law. They did something that was illegal. Yes, you would think, but I know that there are all kinds of safeguards for politicians.
Yeah, parliamentary privilege and
and
cabinet confidences and so forth.
Yeah, like I don't know if it's actually enshrined in law, but how many times have you heard politicians, after making a massive mess of something, to say, "Oops, but we meant well"?
Yeah,
right. Which no, but I mean, they use this all the time. But you and I would never be able to do something and then say, "Well, but don't charge me because I meant well."
Yeah,
right. They never apply this to the common folk. Right. They reserve this type of defense for themselves.
Yes. And also, so then let me bring you to Keith's post here, because he has an important concern. He says, breaking the Federal Court of Appeal will be releasing its decision this Friday on whether the federal government broke the law by invoking the Emergencies Act against peaceful protesters during the Freedom Convoy and froze my client's bank account. Now, this phrase peaceful protesters is important because so the federal court that invoking the Emergencies Act was illegal, and that implies that peaceful protest, it implies that the court recognized that these protesters were within their rights and that the protesters were peaceful and the protesters weren't causing such a disturbance that the Emergencies Act was required. If that ruling is overturned now, it means that none of those actions by the protesters, or let's say many of those actions by the protesters, which we currently understand are peaceful and allowed, are suddenly judged by a new standard. And the new standard might be that carrying a picket sign on the street side of Wellington, the sidewalk of Wellington, doing nothing untoward other than standing there, might be deemed illegal if there happens to be trucks parked on Wellington simultaneously. Like if you're adjacent to actions that were deemed illegal or chargeable offenses, then you might also be deemed to have committed some sort of crime.
Yep.
That's really dangerous.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And let's face it, I mean, we've seen plenty of protests over the last year that in many cases are not peaceful. In fact, to use the Liberals' language, they would be deemed to be hateful easily by their standards.
Yeah.
But as you and I have discussed before, the greatest, most important crime that you can commit in this country is to go up against the government.
Yeah.
Right?
Crimes against the party.
There is nothing worse than taking on the government.
Speaking of government, I have another issue to share with you. This is a video. I just saw it from, and let me make sure the sound is on. Let me know if you can hear it, Jacques, when it starts to play. So this is a video showing that the bike lanes in Edmonton are nice and clear, and you can traverse the bike lanes very simply. But of course, the streets are a total mess, you know, snow and slush, and I don't know why it's not playing. There we go.
What's wrong
Can
with
you
this
hear it?
picture?
The sound's on here. My goodness.
Priorities, folks. Priorities. This is how your tax dollars are spent.
What's wrong with this?
Anyway, it's a very brief video. I've seen others, though. This is not the first that I've seen out of Edmonton. It seems there's something going on in the city council there. Do you have anything to add?
I'm going to try to make this very, very quick because I might have mentioned it before and it can go on a little bit. But in one of the last times, one of the last time I ran in London at the federal level, I was asked, just like all other candidates, my views on a sort of, you know, like these national strategies that get rolled out for all kinds of stuff. And this one was I in favor of the Liberals' national strategy on not just bike lane, but, you know, bicycle in general. And I, again, to make it brief, I wrote back and I said, no, I'm absolutely opposed to it because these things should be done locally. And I pointed out, and of course, you have to provide these credentials to people in order for them to, well, to give credibility to what you have to say. And for about 15 years when I was in London, I was commuting to work on my bicycle, depending on the weather, but about 7.5 months of the year. So that, yeah, and I mentioned that to them, but I said, look, we live in a country that is the second largest in the world with very different geographies and different terrain, different, you know, weather. I think you don't need to be that hardcore of a cyclist to do that 12 months of the year in Vancouver.
Mm-hmm.
But my goodness, and I used to go to Winnipeg a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be hardcore to do this, right? So
Yeah.
the conditions are very different. So when you come out with these ideas that you can have a national strategy, I pointed out to them it doesn't make any sense at all, because it has to be local. And the lady that I corresponded with told me that my answer was the most sensible and comprehensive they had received from any of the candidates. And she said, you got me thinking.
Good.
Right? Well, so now I'm looking at this,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking, how many? I would love to know what is the usage rate in the winter. I mean, Edmonton's cold too, and clearly gets a lot of snow.
Yeah.
I can't imagine that. What are like 100 people do this, and all the expenditure?
Yeah.
Right. Again, it's such a poor use of taxpayers' money, all for virtue signaling.
And it's causing a weird problem in Alberta too, whereby Ottawa has promoted this national strategy, as you say. And what that really means is that there are some money uh, and strings attached to that money. So Ottawa will provide municipalities with certain funds if the municipality agrees to certain designs for intersections and roads and sidewalks. But Calgary, for example, and Edmonton both receive a significant amount of money from the provincial government. So the provincial government in Alberta is saying now, like, hey, wait, we're having a problem of traffic congestion. That's a problem we're trying to solve provincially. And you're implementing in Calgary these bike lanes, which is causing a significant traffic congestion. And so our initiatives seem to be at odds here. And the provincial government is having to sort of flex its muscle and say, like, in where we are at odds, the province has to win, or you're not going to get this provincial funding.
Yep.
So there's strings attached here, and it's clearly a case where, like, I agree with you, these decisions should be made locally. The designs should be sensitive to local geography and climate and weather and stuff. And Ottawa should stay out of this. This is not the proper role of the federal government. I have another one for you.
Sure.
So guess what? The heritage minister has cautioned that Canadians appear disengaged with government messaging. And I read this and smiled. Like, I am so happy that Canadians are disengaging from government messaging. I'm just sad that this means that CBC is going to get even more money and more reinforcement in terms of policy and regulation, and CRTC's help and all that stuff. But had you seen this news?
I had not. I do find it funny that they want to enlist the CBC, given that the CBC's market share, viewership is terrible. So, I mean, it's too bad that they're going to fund our money to them, but I don't think it's going to increase the engagement. If anything, these are, anybody who sees this, who's disengaged, is going to be even more so.
Yeah.
Because recognizing that you now want to use some kind of propaganda machine to try to get me re-engaged. I mean, it's missing the point entirely.
And not long ago, CBC, and in a related message earlier today, I saw, and I'm sorry I don't have it ready to share on screen, but apparently CBC will hire some more journalists in various regions across the country and set up 11 new offices for them. And that's crazy, because not long ago, CBC did exactly the opposite, where they started to shut down regional offices and centralize everything in Toronto or Quebec City. And so it's just this ebb and flow of money. Well, we're going to expand into the local areas, or we're going to pull back from the local areas and centralize, or we're going to expand again. And, oh, no, we're going to. But another thing I want to point out is this phrase, social cohesion. My understanding is that is a phrase, when translated, showed up a lot in like Maoist era Chinese propaganda.
Yep.
So the Chinese Communist Party talked about social cohesion a lot, and of course that what it really means is propaganda.
By the way, this reminds me, I think it might have come from his office. I don't know if you saw that they now want to roll out, sorry. They want to roll out, you're probably borderline old enough to remember which still exists today, but the CRTC demanding that a minimum of 15% of songs on radio needed to be from Canadian artists and things of that nature. For a while, it was great, right? We managed to escape these top-down directives demanding that you pump so much Canadian material with the internet. But now they want to get all over this, and I saw that now they are going to demand the same thing of streamers. Whether it's Netflix or Amazon Prime, Amazon Video, or right, that you're going to have on your shelf a certain, and I think some of them have already said, look, we we might be out of here if we have to abide by these rules. It
Yeah.
is once again it is so condescending to Canadian artists to say, you know what, you're not very good, so we're going to compel people to listen to you. I've pointed out many times that bands like Rush have never needed any help. Right? If you're good, people are going to find you. They don't need to be force fed your music or your movies. And if anything, once again, it's counterproductive because it doesn't compel you to improve, because you now have sort of a minimum standard. Well, my music is going to get played whether I bust my backside or not, right?
Yeah. The metric is the number of plays versus how many people actually appreciate it. Some companies, as you say, are likely to pull back and avoid this problem. Other companies, they're going to take the money. Crave, for example, to just call them out, I noticed within the past year, and I've since stopped my subscription, but not long ago, suddenly Crave was, now this could have been a technical glitch, but I'm suspicious that all of a sudden Crave was defaulting to French language for me, or it was highlighting shows that were available only in French. And I wondered about this, and I checked my settings, and sure enough, my settings are, on my account, English language, no captions, and I'm obviously not located in Quebec or New Brunswick or areas where French might be a default for people. And so it seemed to me that despite French not being my default, they were pushing this content upon me. And I just felt very coercive, actually. Again, could be a technical glitch, but it seems coincidental.
Anyway, in any case, once again, this is none of the government's business.
Right. I have another one here for us. So again, I got to give credit to Blacklock Reporter. They just do some great work here. But I noticed this headline. I'd love your thoughts about it. Let me just read the headline. Canada faces hotel shortage. Lobbyists tell the Commons Industry Committee Hotel Association predicts that the country will be short 20,000 rooms in 4 short years without immediate tax breaks. Now, the reason this caught my eye, and I wanted to ask you about it, is how is it that the market isn't correcting for this? Like, if they're short rooms, that means there's demand for the rooms, so they should just increase the supply. When the demand is so high, what's preventing hotels from expanding?
David, I can tell you that whenever I encounter these types of really strange happenings in the marketplace, that you don't have to scratch very far to trace it back to some kind of government rules or red tape, bureaucracy, excessive taxation. I mean, all taxation is excessive, but so in this case, I would have to scratch and try to find out. But let me emphasize here again how people will pick aside an argument and quickly change it depending on what it is that they want to accomplish. Right? We often hear that entrepreneurs and companies, they're just out there to make a quick buck. They all they care about is to make money. Well, in your introduction to this, you pointed out that if there's going to be a shortage of room, well, you didn't explicitly say that, but what it amounts to is that they'll be able to increase prices because there'll be such a demand. Well, if they can increase prices, that means that their return on equity is going to be massive. Well, in a free market, and this happens all the time, is that if you have an industry where ROEs are much greater than they ought to be. It attracts other players, and eventually it brings down the ROE because it brings down prices. Conversely, when ROEs are terrible in an industry, usually it means that some have to exit. They go bankrupt or because the returns aren't big enough, right? A market left to his own device should be able to do this. So I don't know the specific to answer your question, but I guarantee you that the government has something to do with this, and it's not good.
And if I could be suspicious for another moment, I've wondered if there's a false demand here, like you said, if demand is high and they can raise prices, that means they can raise capital, that means they can expand, or other players will come into the market because there's an opportunity. But why aren't they expanding? It's either some sort of regulatory constraint or an unwillingness to apply that capital to growth. If there's an unwillingness to apply that, like for example, this headline shows up, and I don't see adjacent headlines about a thriving tourism industry. I don't see headlines about how people are traveling throughout Canada and coming to visit and spending nights in hotels. And so where's the demand coming from? Is the demand also government subsidized or imposed? And like my suspicious brain says, currently our hotel system must be compensating for a lack of housing. We have, still a absolute torrent of newcomers to Canada coming through various modes of immigration, and is putting a significant demand. So if I'm owning a hotel, I'm thinking I could build new hotels and enjoy this new and provide more supply, but only if I know I'm going to have demand. And again, if the government just changes their immigration policy, suddenly the demand will fall out from under the rug.
Yep.
And that might explain why hotels aren't willingly expanding and putting their capital toward growth. Anyway, maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I have another one here. Here's a video from Frank Terrazzano. I know you've mentioned him in the past. I believe you're probably familiar with him. He's talking about Canada's tax burden with a guest on their podcast. Please check out the Canada Taxpayers Federation. Can I just play this 1-minute clip? Here we go.
It goes to taxes.
Oh, I'm going to rewind that so we can watch from the beginning. Give me a thumbs up. You can hear the audio.
Like, actually think about it, right? If we haven't all just been living in this reality that we've been living in, anybody would be like, this is insanity. That more than 40% of the average family's budget goes to taxes, right? And we're not even talking about like the richest of the rich. We're talking about an average Canadian family, an average hardworking Canadian family. For the family, their biggest cost isn't the house they live in. It's not the food they eat or the clothes they buy. It's the taxes they pay. And we've seen a massive explosion in this average tax bill, right? So you go back to 1961. Since then, that tax bill has gone up by 2,700%. Okay, 2,700%. Just to show you how outrageous that is, inflation, general consumer prices have gone up by about 900%. So tax bill, 2,700% growth. Inflation, which everyone knows has gone up, 900%. That's how crazy all of this is, Gage. Like, actually think about it. Right?
No surprise to me.
No, I'm a big fan of the Taxpayers Federation. They do great work. And yeah, look at what's going on in Minnesota, right? With the fraud. You have to be hopelessly naive to think that none of this is going on in this country. And
right.
These very, very high level of taxation are in part due to the massive amount of waste, fraud. And you and I might have discussed this before, I forget, but there are things that I consider to be fraudulent, even though they are perfectly legal. Look, I look at the millions and millions of dollars that we send abroad for weird causes like gender equity in Tanzania, or to other countries to help them craft wording that is pronoun sensitive. I mean,
To get more women involved in the removal of mines in minefields.
right.
I saw that one. That was kind of crazy.
I mean, I suppose from a legal perspective, it is not fraud, but to me, it amounts to. I mean, it's a blatantly. I mean, if you want to support these causes, then reach in your own wallet and pay for them. To take this away from taxpayers who would I'm sure, find a much better, use for it. I mean, healthcare. We always talk about healthcare in the country and what a terrible state it is. I mean, people have repeatedly pointed out, like, can you imagine the number of, physicians or nurses or hospital or MRI machines that we could have gotten instead of, right? I mean, life is about choices, and we have a government that makes terrible, terrible choices. I mean, at the very least, they shouldn't do any of this and reduce our taxes. The taxes are way, way too high.
Well, as Frank Terrazzano points out, it's disgusting. The tax bill for the average Canadian family, I spend more on government than I do on groceries. I spend more on government than I do on my home. I spend more on government than every other thing in my life. The fact that the government is the biggest chunk of the family's expense should be a red flag. This is just a horrible. Here, speaking of healthcare, because you brought it up, I have this at the ready. Melissa L.M. Rogers, she points out that, so despite the fact that Canada has so-called free healthcare, the reality is that many Canadians leave the country to get healthcare elsewhere. Canadians, she says, travel abroad, or they just possibly die waiting for care. So this issue of traveling abroad, and this was a report she's quoting from FraserInstitute.org, showing the estimated number of patients receiving treatment outside of Canada in the last 1 year. This blew my mind. Well, again, it didn't surprise me, but I'm just glad that it was posted, because people talk about this argument about a two-tiered healthcare system, and we can't have a two-tiered healthcare system, some for the rich and everyone else. We already have a two-tiered healthcare system. We have people who can afford to leave Canada for healthcare, and everyone else who cannot afford to leave to get healthcare. We have a two-tiered system already. And actually, for those that can leave and get healthcare elsewhere, that is less burden on the Canadian healthcare system. Why is anybody angry that they actually leave to get healthcare elsewhere? They're still paying their taxes. You're still taking the money out of their wallet to pay for the Canadian healthcare system. The whole issue is just maddening to me. Had you seen this report?
I had seen the one they did in 2019. The number at the time was 61,000. I can't quite make out. What is the total now? It's in excess of
105,000 now.
105. Okay. Yeah, it was back in 2019. I think the estimated number was 61,000. And this number is going to grow again because of the demographics. More and more people are going to have to do that. Let me add to your two-tier, because first of all, you are absolutely correct. It exists already. There's another facet to this, which is that, and this is not as well known, but as someone pointed out, we do have a two-tier system in this country, like without having to leave. It's no longer based on money. It's based on who you know. And I can tell you, I got a couple of family members who are physicians. There's a lot of that going on. A lot of, you take my patient, or you give them priority and I'll return the favor, that type of stuff. So that exists as well. Now, you said something that I need to have a little bone to pick here. because it's because it's commonplace, and I think it always has been, to demonize the rich, right? Because the argument that will be made here is that these 105,000 people, they were all rich.
Right.
The fact is, I know people in my own life who were very modest people. They had a good living, but it was blue collar, and they raised a lot of children, but they lived a frugal life, right? They didn't go on vacation, big expensive vacation every year, and so they saved their money. And the point that I've made in prior presentation is, if you have person A who operates this way and save money, and person B who goes on a vacation every year and save very little money, and they both of them get to a point where they need medical care, but person A, having been frugal, is now in a position to pay for private care, to demonize them as rich, and to somehow, having lived a frugal life, does not entitle you to use your money as you see fit, is completely missing the point, right? Like, it's easy to slur people and say, well, he was rich and he's not allowed to do that. But in some cases, you got people who save money simply because, again, they didn't live an extravagant lifestyle. And to punish them seems extremely bizarre.
Well said.
So there's a lot of stuff here that, it's just terrible. And again, this is going to get worse. I mean, I've given the advice to people to the extent that they can, right? And I recognize not everyone can, but I have said, go to your bank and open a savings account that becomes your healthcare account, and put in, like, if it's $5 a month, then so be it. But put in a regular amount, see it grow, and never touch it until you either die, or if you got something that needs to be looked after and you're told, well, it's going to be 2 years, then take some of that money and go somewhere else.
Yeah. Most Canadians live within 3 hours of the American border. Most Canadians live within 4 hours of a significant American city. Like, even in Saskatchewan, you live just north of Minot. In Alberta, you live just north of Billings. It's not difficult to drive south, pay for an MRI, the day that you call a day in advance, drive down and get an MRI, or wait in Canada for 10 months.
Yeah.
So I have another one to show you. The food professor. I made a mistake there. There we go. The food professor posted this very dismal outlook. 4,000 Canadian restaurants are predicted to disappear in 2026. Absurd.
Well, if I understand correctly, a lot of that actually stems back from the restrictions during COVID.
Yeah.
Because now, again, I don't know the numbers. I cannot quote them. But I know at the margin that there are certain things that have changed in behavior among some people. Like, I heard recently of someone I know who used to be in a choir. The choir had to disband during COVID, and the momentum was lost, and the choir no longer exists. Similarly, and again, I don't know what the percentages are, but I am absolutely convinced that there were people whose routine was to go out to a restaurant once a week, twice a week, something like that. COVID compelled them, of course, to stop that because they couldn't do it anymore. And then they maybe discovered the joy of cooking at home, right? So there have been cultural or habit modification.
The new normal.
Yeah, that are now they're contributing to this. I think fewer people go. Of course, the inflation um, that we've had have made the going out much more expensive than it used to be, and a lot of them were kind of hanging on by a thread while they were getting support because they didn't have any, but many of them took on debt and they have never been able to dig themselves out. So again, these things, I mean, sometimes things happen because people have a different viewpoint on their own. I mean, like one of the contributing factor, which this time has nothing to do with government, is that I think we all know that the largest margins in terms of profit in a restaurant is when they've managed to sell you some booze, right?
Yeah.
But there's been a very important change in, again, the habits of younger people compared to older people. Young people drink a lot less than the previous generation, a lot less.
I've heard this statistic, and I haven't cared to look too deeply into it, but now that you bring that up, like you've been hearing this, and
well, I saw the numbers. I think the numbers are like the new generation drinks something like 30% less than their parents.
Oh, I think I heard of a speaker, like maybe a TED talk or a TEDx talk. Someone was saying that, like, yeah, the seniors, the young generation need to drink more. Or it was a comedian or somebody that was saying that, like, because they're not meeting, like it's a social lubricant, and get people out and talking and socializing. And if you're just not out socializing and you're at home doom scrolling all the time, you're not engaged socially in the same way that the previous generations were. That explains some of that percentage.
Yeah, I mean, young people will often cite health reasons, which I think is positive as a reason. But I'm sure that what you mentioned is also a large contributing factor.
Yeah. So restaurants continue to go bankrupt. This is a trend across small business, by the way. This isn't just. This is really terrible for the economy. Employers, I'll not rant much further on there. I have another tweet I still call them tweets, to show you. I'm encouraging you, Jacques, to have a look at this account. And if for those of you tuning in, I mean, check her out. This is, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name. Magate Wade, maybe. I think the E is probably emphasized a little bit. She calls herself an African prosperity activist. I just love what she posts. She's got a really interesting perspective about things. Let me just read a few of them. A better question for, and I see our friend Keegan follows her as well. So a better question for a better question for people in developing countries is not what should our leaders do to improve things, but what should they stop doing? Regardless, progress starts with removing and avoiding bad policies like the plague, not with another doomed to fail 5-year plan. And I want to show you a few others of hers, because there's a theme here. You can see there's a theme. The fastest way to develop Africa is not more foreign aid. It is removing the regulations that make it impossible for Africans to develop Africa. Have you seen her before?
No. But it's the same old story. I mean, this applies all over the globe.
Yeah. I think I saw her first. So, sorry, go on.
No, you continue and I'll loop back in.
No, let me find the original tweet that caught my eye, and you can continue, please, your story.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, once again, you need investments, and people will only invest if they have a reasonable expectation of a return. And if you start creating a situation where you don't know which regulations is going to come in, or if the political climate is going to change, and suddenly, because, in some cases, certainly for large, let's take Venezuela as an example. So now their president's been taken out, so to speak, and Trump is trying to get oil companies to go in. And I think the point they've made very clear to him is that nobody is going to spend billions and billions of dollars, which is what is apparently required to fix the infrastructure problem that they have, without some kind of assurance that things are not going to change. I mean, do you want, and it doesn't even have to be a dictator. All you need is a duly elected extreme left party that, say, wants to nationalize, which is what happened before, right?
Yeah.
People in power seem to me to be completely clueless as to the importance of stability to encourage investment. And without investments, you're not going to go anywhere. So, I mean, she's right. There's all kinds of regulations, and sometimes it's, what else is coming down that is going to make it more difficult.
Yeah. So part of the problem you're talking about is policies that are unfriendly to new investment and business. But also part of, like, and something you didn't say, but I'm sure you understand as well, is policy lurch. Like, for example, I think British Columbia has forever harmed the business community with its insane policies regarding the UNDRIP. And so the fact that, so even if a new government were to form in British Columbia and repeal some of these ridiculous claims and settle some of the land title questions, in recent memory, business owners know that British Columbia did this bizarre thing. The new government is just temporary. The policy can lurch back to insanity at any time without much warning. And so it really, I think that's really dangerous. I agree with you. There's another post here I wanted to share with you from this outspoken lady. The foreign experts who design Africa's development plans have one thing in common. None of them have ever started a business in Africa. They've studied Keynesian economics, they've read books, attended conferences. They've never tried to get a permit. They've never dealt with customs. They've never paid bribes just to keep their shop open. That's why their plans fail. They are designed by people who have never experienced the reality they're planning for. Want better policy? Just ask entrepreneurs what actually stops them, and then remove those things. She's smart.
Amen. Yeah.
And I read her posts and I think how apt her content is for a Canadian audience. Like, she's talking about Africa, but those parallels are here. Maybe not to the same level of, like, those policies exist here as well. Those regulations, those barriers exist here as well, but perhaps for not as long. So it wasn't long ago that Canada had a freer market. And I think that's something that in Africa they've not had. Like, give free market. Actually, there are a few posts where she kind of points out, like, we've given free market a chance in parts of Africa, and hey, look, those parts of Africa seem to be thriving relative to their neighbors. So I just find her content really interesting, and I thought I'd bring that up for you.
This actually reminds me of another post from Keith Wilson. That's his name, the lawyer.
Yeah.
He was pointing out that the granting of license or permission or whatever to build a pipeline is entirely, as per our Constitution, the realm of the federal government. But the Liberals, in a generous mood, have decided to expand this to grant veto power to Aboriginal band. And well, apparently, some of them have already vetoed it. This is a perfect example of what I'm talking about in terms of who in their right mind, in terms of CEO, would say, okay, we're going to go and spend $25 billion on this, but we're at the mercy of a band that the government decided to grant veto power to come out of the blue and say, hey, you're $15 billion in, but now, we refuse. You cannot have a thriving economy when you don't know the rules of the game.
Yeah. And that shows up in the Globe and Mail. The Bank of Canada, they say the country is stuck in a vicious cycle of low productivity. And they appear surprised.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Bank of Canada has been sounding the alarm on this for a while. Of course, it's somewhat laughable that they would comment on this, since they are partly responsible for some of the problems that we have. But at least they're calling it out, right? They acknowledge that we have a problem and it needs to be resolved.
Yeah, there's the knowing doing gap. We know this is a problem. What should we do? But we're not going to do anything about it. I know I'm overweight and I know exactly how to solve that problem. But knowing the solution doesn't mean I'm that I have the willpower or wherewithal to actually implement the solution.
But David, this is where the one of the largest differences between libertarians and, say, liberals is that I don't believe for one moment that I have the ability to run an economy. Whereas Carney absolutely does believe that he can run an economy.
Yeah.
But part of it is that he has to believe this in order to continue his work, because, as I've pointed out many, many times, if I were to become prime minister, my job would be significantly less demanding than his, because most of the stuff he does, I wouldn't do. I wouldn't bother. I wouldn't, because I know that it's a waste of time. The idea is to get out of the way.
Yeah. Government is in the way. They keep taking our money, and guess what they do with it? You mentioned this earlier, or something like this. You kind of called this out. So I was going through my bookmarks, and I just noticed, of course, Andy Lee, who does really good work to make, to raise awareness. She pointed out that almost $5 million was spent in Mongolia for a gender equality strategy for technical and vocational training and education.
Not a function of government, period. Come on.
This is after almost
Keep
10
the money in our pockets.
Let me stop you there, but almost $10 million to pay for to leverage gender responsive climate finance into business support organizations to strengthen capacity to translate between gender and finance to promote gender lens investing in Vietnam. That's the whole statement there. What does that even mean?
All right.
It's absurd.
I keep saying that there are people who have read enough to be able to slap together some words that sound good, but the amalgamation of these words amount to nothing. These
grant proposals are very bizarre. This is an organization called the World University Service of Canada. Wait. The world is filled with people who have their own governments, who have their own nonprofits and charities and businesses, and don't take money from my family and spend it on, sorry, let me read that again. To leverage gender, I'll do it right here. Gender responsive climate finance, providing training support services and other local women's business support organizations to strengthen their capacity to translate between gender and finance, whatever that means, to promote gender lens investing in Vietnam. Sorry, I've got good things to do with my family's finances. mouths to feed, things to pay for, my own charities that I'm interested in. Sorry, I'm raising my voice and getting a little enthused. No, what's the word? Excited?
No, but David, these things are so outrageous. You wonder, why aren't people on the streets with torches and pitchfork, going to
Storm the castle.
storm the castle? Yes, I mean, this is so outrageous.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, what else?
Oh, I want to address a comment here made
Yeah,
by
sure.
D.L. Elliott. We're talking about healthcare, and he said, I'm only mad that people have to leave and are spending dollars. I think it says outside of Canada instead. Yes, that is a valid point as well. But, Dr. Day in BC, who sued the government, trying to get private clinic to be essentially allowed, was making the point that he and many, many physicians would work longer hours if they could get paid, right? So what we have, in a sense, is an artificial constraint on the supply of physician services, and we could tap that, by making these things legal. In such a case, I think that Mr. Elliott would get his wish. A lot of people would be able to keep the money in the country and pay the people here for the services instead of having to leave. But again, it's an ongoing battle, right? I mean, he took the government to court, ended up losing after the government, of course, using taxpayers' money to try to essentially deplete his funds, right? Because that's what they do. They stall, they use all kinds of tactics in the hope that the person's going to run out of money, which is absolutely despicable, particularly since it's not their own money, right? They're using taxpayers.
Yeah. Agreed. Sorry, I have nothing to respond there. I mean, you kind of captured it. Thanks, Mr. Elliott, for the chats. And I see Snarky Trader is with us again. Hello. Good to see you both. And maybe others are also tuning in. I have to admit, I wasn't even watching the chats. So if there was something really important, bring it up again, chat it again, and we'll, Jacques and I can see it and we'll respond to it. Okay, Jacques, I have another item to share with you. This might be, I don't know, I might be so depressed after reading this with you that I'll need to leave for the night. but here's what it says. And let me fix the view of it so we can see. How did I have this all set up earlier? It seemed to be better. Anyways, they are flooding Parliament with distraction bills. Okay. I think this is true. There's a deliberate strategy in the current Parliament to flood the atmosphere, with all kinds of these bills, so that none of them can be truly scrutinized, and eventually they'll just get shuffled through or something. That seems to be the strategy. But all of them attack various pillars of Canadian freedom, and let's just read through them. The bills attacking due process and court rights. Okay, S206. This is from the Senate of all places. Administrative monetary penalties enable penalties without hearings, judges, trials, and common law protections. C63, the Online Harms Act. We've talked about that. It's 27, the Digital Charter Act. So this is about AI regulators issuing oversight, and of course, with that will be digital ID. C52, Beneficial Ownership Transparency Act. It expands federal surveillance and administrative enforcement. Like, we need more of that. Do we need more federal surveillance and administrative enforcement? Like, have you been aware of those four?
I must admit, only 2 or 3 of the 4.
Yeah, we've talked about that one. Let's go on. Bill C-26, the Critical Cybersecurity Act. Cyber Systems Act. I'm sorry. So this is about shifting to agencies, moving power from Parliament into other agencies, like they've done with CRTC. So the Online Streaming Act gives CRTC a whole bunch of. The Online News Act, of course, gives more power to CRTC. Property rights. C-234, the agricultural fuel restrictions, expands federal control over farm operations. The Jane Goodall Act, S-241, a sweeping biosafety authority over wildlife, land, and private property. I had no idea. C-49, Atlantic Accord Amendments, expands federal control over offshore land, climate restrictions, and energy development. Like, if you're tuning in, this list. This goes on here. We're about halfway through. Carry on. Bills attacking freedom of speech and assembly. So C-63, the Online Harms Act that was mentioned previously. This was new. C-261, the Misleading Communications Act, penalties for misleading speech. I mean,
Well, then all politicians are going to be penalized then, correct?
and the entire CBC.
Yeah.
Oh, something
No,
tells me this
I
is
love
not designed.
this bill. Put all politicians in jail. That's good.
If only it'll be used that way. But no, this is an axe that will be wielded not that way. Bill C-70, the Foreign Interference Act, mass surveillance powers with vague thresholds. Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, we need more action on foreign interference, but they're just justifying more surveillance powers, reminding everyone that the Public Health Agency of Canada did and may still be tracking every SIM card in the country. Remember that?
Yeah.
Public Health Agency of Canada tracked 33 million cell phones for an undisclosed time period, and I'm not aware that they've stopped that program. So more surveillance powers. Bills attacking religious freedom. Bill C-9, the harmful conduct redefinition, allows the state to regulate spiritual beliefs and pastoral work under the phrase harm. Moving on. Bill S-206, the hub of the entire system, gives federal departments the power to issue penalties without judicial review or common law protections or a hearing or a judge. It turns federal agencies into their own courts. This is the point here. No democracy on earth should tolerate this. The trouble is people don't know. And that reminds us of the opening statement here. They're just flooding Parliament with distraction bills. And like no Canadian can keep up on this.
No, I this is why we need, to the extent that people can, support the Canadian Constitution Foundation or Canadian Taxpayers Federation. I mean, we all need to we need to help each other because it's overwhelming. I mean,
Yeah.
we are a small party. We don't have a lot of resources, but whenever you see an entity that flags one of these and points out how terrible it is,
Yeah.
we have to support one another that way, because otherwise the Liberals are just going to get away with this.
Well, it is what we're seeing is a divide and conquer strategy. Like to flood the Parliament and the Senate with so many of these bills causes a fracture across the checks, the normal institutions that would be a check or balance. It causes the Canadian Taxpayer Federation to become narrowly focused on this one bill, or the Constitution Federation to focus on this one or two bills. And so it's a divide and conquer flood strategy, I think. It's not different than an omnibus strategy.
No, exactly. Well, there's some really evil people in government.
They just can't be blamed for being, omnibus now. I mean, maybe that word was. It's just clearly a great strategy if you're if you're on the offense, right?
Yeah.
But too many Canadians just can't pay this close attention to what's going on in Parliament that we can't be aware. Well, any other topics you want to touch on?
No, I think we've done a pretty good.
Pretty good overview of the news.
Yeah.
What's going on? There's lots more to say, like Alberta independence movement, the land titles issues in British Columbia, because everything, like there's so much going on here kind of near to me.
Yeah.
I've sort of lost track of what's happening in the East. The eastern provinces are, the news out there is sort of quiet from my perspective. Are you noticing anything out there in the news?
Well, here in Ontario, and I posted about this, I think it was last week, but Doug Ford's, again, childish, well, not just childish, but he's decided to...
Hey, Arizona's here. Sorry to interrupt. I just noticed a chat from Arizona Libertarian Party. Okay, carry on, Jacques.
He's decided to remove all, I think it's Crown Royal liquor from LCBO. And because, if I understand correctly, they decided to move a bottling plant to the U.S. And, and of course, from a libertarian perspective, my point was, it's such a shame that people can't decide for themselves which liquor they will buy or not buy, right? It's, the government coming in and will decide for you that it's totally inappropriate to get Crown Royal in your basket. I mean, when the government decides which alcohol you can or cannot buy, and the price at which you have to pay for it, kind of crazy. So sorry to interrupt you, but we just got this new visitor from Arizona, and I have to say, we're wrapping up. You've arrived at sort of the last moment, but we're happy to see you, and come again.
Come again. Yeah. Okay. Before we sign off, actually, we should mention that there's an upcoming conference. And Jacques, do you remember the dates? Do you have them in your brain?
May 2nd and 3rd.
So May 2nd and 3rd, everyone. What we're planning to do is we'll send information out, but you can sign up and attend from home. But also you can attend in location, either New Brunswick, Moncton, correct?
Correct.
And Airdrie, just north of Calgary. So we have two locations in person simultaneously, and we'll be, interacting and sharing, broadcasting between the two. And then you can also watch the broadcast online, and that's coming up on those dates. We also have some by-elections coming up, and we're looking for people interested to run as candidates in the Alberta area and Chrystia Freeland's riding, where she has now resigned. And I think there's a by-election happening there.
Well, there will be, but I don't think...
There will be.
Yeah, I don't think...
That's University... I forget the name of the riding. It'll come to me.
Yeah.
Anyways, please pay attention. Watch for the news of the conference and the by-elections. Thanks for tuning in. Jacques, good to see you. Happy New Year.
Yeah, again, good to see you, and Happy New Year, everyone.
All right, so we're going to sign off. Everyone have a nice evening.